Okay, welcome to our webcast series. Today we meet Frieda Levycky. She's an English qualified lawyer with over 15 years experience in the international legal arena, both in private practice and in-house. Her expertise lies in international cross-border M&A transactions with a focus on the commodities trade. She's also lived and worked in Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, London, Geneva, and now Cape Town. Her legal experience is vast and, in my personal opinion, my mind, is unrivaled in the South African market. She's now launched Braving Boundaries, which is a life coaching solution for lawyers. Frieda, in my opinion, as a friend and also from a professional perspective, is a true trailblazer. Truly global legal professional sitting in Cape Town, which is highly unusual. She's now using her skills and her talent and experience to give back to the professionals that she's worked with. She has walked the walk and she's talked the talk, and now that she's there to help. As I mentioned a minute ago, for full disclosure, we are friends. Two Pommies living and working very hard in South Africa. And she also ran a brilliant online pub quiz during the lockdown. So welcome, Frieda. How's it going?
Thank you very much. What a lovely introduction. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Well, obviously today, as we've mentioned, as we talked about, I'm quite keen to discuss everything from your entire journey up to launching Braving Boundaries, the issues around mental health, specifically in the legal sector. And so there's a lot to discuss. So hopefully we won't keep these gentlemen here for all afternoon. We can get out and enjoy the sunshine. I'm just quite pleased that I got to put some clothes on again. To be honest, I got out of the house, got out of my pajamas and actually had a purpose. I was dusting off, I almost wore a suit.
I haven't worn one
for so long. I was like, oh, look, I do have smart clothes. So if I can, if I can jump into, who is Frieda? Who is Frieda Levycky? What is your background in terms of your legal background and your career, education, that kind of thing?
Gosh, so legal-wise, so as you said, I'm an English lawyer, and I started my legal career in London with one of the big internationals. Loved working down in London. And I chose an international because I really wanted that international experience. So I ended up in Hong Kong for about 9 months as part of my training contract, fell in love with Asia and that lifestyle and all of the opportunities and cross-jurisdictional work there. Came back to London because I was a big believer that I needed 2 years of experience in the headquarter office. So came back to London and did my first 2 years as an associate there. And then the minute I could, I was back out in Singapore and back in that cross-jurisdictional work and working for the same firm out there. And then whilst I was in Singapore, I had an opportunity to go on secondment to one of the big commodities trading companies, and took that opportunity. So ended up working there initially for 6 months, and then they offered me a job to stay as a legal counsel.
Where was that? In Geneva? Or?
That was in Singapore.
I was in Singapore. Okay.
Yeah, and so I moved to Louis Dreyfus then, and I was there for 6 years, I think, in total. So 2010, I moved there originally. And I worked in Singapore, I worked in Dubai, and then I ended up at headquarters in Geneva. So that was my in-house role that moved me through there. And that was fabulous because it gave me a really, really broad scope of work to cover. It was no longer just mergers and acquisitions, which is what I qualified into. It was very much all of the in-house counsel work, so loans, looking at litigation, looking at commercial contracts, really digging into the business side of being a lawyer. And advising internal clients, which were my management team. And then from Geneva, I decided I was going to take a year out, and we can talk about all the reasons why I decided to do that. But I got to a stage in my life where my personal life wasn't being nurtured as much as my professional life. And so I decided to take that year out and concentrate on looking after me. So I travelled.
What year was that?
End of 2016.
Okay. So still fairly recently.
Yeah. End of 2016. 2017 was an amazing year. So I travelled did all the things that all the places I hadn't managed to get to, like New Zealand and Australia. And that brought me to South Africa, to Zimbabwe, Botswana, and then down to Cape Town. And I spent 8 months volunteering for a charity down here called Mothers to Mothers, which is a charity I'd supported whilst in corporate. And realised I actually did enjoy being a lawyer. It was a question that was definitely coming up towards the end of 2016, and could I carry on doing it? And I did. I really enjoyed it, and I knew I was good at being a lawyer by this stage. That volunteering experience had really solidified that.
So giving yourself that space, allowed you to fall back in love with the law again, almost.
Yeah, very much so, and to see that I had strengths there and my confidence was back up, because I started to like myself. I started to see the value that I had in myself through that year out. And whether I had taken a year out or not, it was having that space to start to see what value I brought to the table. And so when I came back I decided I was going to move to Cape Town, because I fell in love with Cape Town itself, which is the most beautiful, beautiful city. And it gave me the lifestyle that I wanted as well, by which stage I'd realised that the outdoors was super important to me. I wanted to be surrounded by people that had the same mentality towards that work-life balance. And it's so pretty. I mean, the whole place is just so pretty. Yeah. But I saw an opportunity down here. And so when I went to the law firm that I work for at the moment, I saw an opportunity in the market. There wasn't a big international commodities player down here, and there wasn't that many English lawyers down here. And so to be able to combine the two, I'd had so much experience across Africa. To be able to come and start working as an African commodities lawyer was a really good opportunity.
You say that you had a lot of experience across Africa. Was that from the Louis Dreyfus days? Okay. So then you touched on all of that. And that's led you down here. So 3 years you've been here. Yeah,
when did I come? Yeah, mid-2017. So.
I was going to say, because, I came at the beginning of 2017. So
I didn't realise exactly. I didn't realise it was that short.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you said 2017 was an amazing year, I was thinking, well, that was a really tough year, actually. So moving from Hong Kong to here, and having been in Asia for 10 years myself, it was quite an interesting move. But we'll get onto all of that later on as well. So that's your journey professionally up till sort of 2017 here, and obviously shortly afterwards, I think we probably met, and you've been busy here working as a lawyer, obviously I'm guessing doing pan-Africa work almost effectively. And now, but what drove you to start thinking about braving boundaries? And if you don't mind, talk about what is braving boundaries and what led you to launching that business.
So braving boundaries it's a coaching business. It's a life coaching business, helping legal professionals to gain a happier, healthier, and more fulfilling life by creating a balance between their professional lives and their personal lives. Being a lawyer is hard. The hours are ridiculous. The stress levels are insane. The work pressure to be in the office, to be doing the most prestigious deals, to be bringing in new clients and finding new clients, and showing how amazing you are over all of your competitors, and internally all of the competitors in your associate group and your partner group. And there's pressures at left, right, and centre, and your pressures at home. You've got your wife, your children, your health. You want to stay fit and healthy, and you want to see your friends, and you want to if you're single, you want to be dating, and all of those issues impact particularly on the legal profession. And I've watched it throughout my career. I've struggled with it throughout my career. And Braving Boundaries is there to help lawyers overcome those struggles, because I don't think there is that service out there. I do think that being a lawyer personally gives other legal professionals the comfort that I do understand what their journey is. And that's where Braving Boundaries, that's why Brave and Boundaries has been created.
Where you touched on there in terms of the pressures on the lawyer these days, it's something that I've come across. So anyone who's listening that doesn't know my background, I've been in legal recruitment and research for 18 years across the world in many of the similar countries that you've lived in. We've sort of followed each other around the world without knowing it, and never met until we got to Cape Town. But so I've met maybe tens of thousands of lawyers potentially. I've worked with every law firm from a one-man band to the Magic Circle to the big US giants from Wall Street. So I've seen every aspect of law from a career perspective, and I remember writing an article for a law journal in Hong Kong in 2012, I think, where I was basically touching on sort of this almost disbelief that the lawyer these days has to be Superman or Superwoman. It's like the pressure on them, not just to be technically expert, but to be business developing. That may not come naturally to a sales. The sales side might not come naturally to someone who's a very technical lawyer, but the pressure to make numbers and drive revenue. And I haven't seen that getting any easier in any country that I've worked in. And that build-up of pressure is at some point is going to give, and I think, and we'll touch on some of the stats that I've been reading recently. But like you say, the service that Braving Boundaries is offering doesn't really exist here in South Africa that I can see at the moment.
No, there are a couple of professionals who have left the law. I can't think of her name at the moment. It's a lady in Johannesburg who is a lawyer that has gone into coaching.
Sorry to her.
Gone into coaching. I haven't met her, so I can't really comment. But the need is acknowledged. I just don't know how well received it is in the law firms here at the moment.
Interesting.
At the moment, I'm not sure whether there is this willingness to spend money on something that is deemed a softer issue, and I hate that term, but it isn't obviously bringing in revenue. It's seen as an expense that it's an expense. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because you're going to have to educate and train certain law firms to open up completely. You're going to have to educate them on the need. But I think the themes I've seen for the individual, for the lawyers themselves, hasn't really changed. The only thing that has changed is I feel like the pressure has got even harder. And a lot of that, there's a number of different reasons for that. But obviously for those that don't know, obviously law firms are very driven by the revenue they generate, like every business. But the bigger the law firm, the bigger the overheads, the salaries, the bonuses, the offices, the car parking spaces, the boardrooms, the concierge service from reception, whatever it may be, these need to be paid for. And I think one of the things I've seen, certainly when we were living in Hong Kong and I'm doing a lot of business in mainland China, you saw this, and from Singapore when you would have been there as well, the rise of Singapore, which was fantastic, and a very exciting time it must have been to live there, and I used to visit probably 3 times a year. But the pressure from the clients was becoming to squeeze on fees was becoming very, very commonplace, and to move away from the hourly billing and to more of a flat fee. And then obviously the flick onto that is then the lawyers are getting more and more pressure. So just from a work perspective, you're seeing, I mean, you may disagree because obviously you are a lawyer, but I just think that fee pressure has been 100-fold over the last few years.
Yeah, look, I mean, we'll talk about COVID separately, but I mean, pre-COVID and post-COVID, I mean, this is our life.
This is it.
But the reality is that the pressures of lawyers have been at various stages. There's different pressures on what lawyers struggle with, and you've got law students who are trying to find jobs, so there's that pressure. You've got junior associates trainees trying to become junior associates to be held into their positions. and to get a full-time job once they've qualified. They've got the junior to the senior jump, which is that typical area of competitiveness when you're starting to compete with your peer group. And because you're not really bringing in clients at that junior level, you're starting to work out what you can do, understanding law much better than you did when you started your job. Because trust me, I didn't know what I was doing when I started as a lawyer. I remember starting it in the M&A team and going, I don't know what this is. I shouldn't admit that. I was quite a good M&A lawyer. But so when you get to that senior associate, which is where I think most of that pressure, or senior legal, in-house legal counsel, depending on where you are, that pressure to either bring in clients, identify your niche, identify how you're going to become a partner. If you want to become a partner, some people don't want to, but that is the career path that you're set on as an in-house lawyer. As a private practice lawyer. On the in-house side, often quite a flat structure. So where do you go once you've got to these levels? And then it comes to, well, how do I earn more money? Or how do I grow my career and gain more exposure in what I'm doing? And then when you hit that partner level, you've got all of the things you were talking about, which is, oh, crikey, where do I find my clients now? How do I keep bringing clients in? The pressures of generating revenue, payroll, finding that niche. What happens if your niche gets deteriorated for COVID? It's
two things you just said there. Like the first thing, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've been asked by lawyers, should I specialise or should I be more generalist? And it's like, honestly, I don't know, because it depends on what year it is and what recession we're in, and now COVID's come in, and you're like, well, what's happened to your practice area? So there's never a right or wrong answer. But just on what you said there in terms of that partner track, that's very typical. I've written a couple of pieces, but the first thing I wrote when we went into lockdown is I wrote a 5-page guide to business development for lawyers.
Wow.
And it was just 10 points, 10 simple points, because that's what my job is, mainly, business development, And as I said in the text, I don't know if I sent it to you, actually, I should have done. I thought you should have been the first person I sent it to. I sort of explained who I was, because obviously I wanted to make sure that the lawyers that were reading it weren't like, well, who's this guy, So the first thing that I wrote is that, look, business development is my job every day. Every day we're trying to find new creative ways to get more clients in the door, or how better to service our clients. And our clients are your clients. They're either in-house they're lawyers. And in many cases, the lawyer's client is also a lawyer. So I said, look, from 18 years experience around the world, hopefully I can pass on some of that knowledge. It was incredibly well received. But it was one of those things that I thought, I wanted to help straight away, but also one of those things where I thought, I know lawyers. This doesn't come naturally to a lot of them, to pick up the phone and start selling and start and how to build a relationship, and it doesn't come naturally, and there's a pressure to do that.
It'd be really interesting to see if there is a business development and sales side that is brought in from university when people are from doing their law degrees, to have that element. I remember doing a legal law in practice. I was at Warwick University, and
lovely part of the world.
Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah. And but I remember studying. I did law in practice 1 and law in practice 3. I don't know what happened to 2, but that seemed to disappear in the middle. But I remember thinking, it's this practical exposure, and this. I had to go and present a human rights topic and present at school, one of the sixth form colleges. And go and talk to them about human rights. And actually, public speaking, standing up in front of people I don't know, talking about a topic that I do know what I'm talking about, but having that confidence to go in and talk about it. And these are not skills lawyers have, or certainly not skills that lawyers are taught, and not even through law school, and not university, but the law school element of it. Again, you get a bit more practical exposure, but it's still not the sales side. And to be quite honest, I don't think I've ever taught how to sell. And when I became a partner, I had no client base. I'd come from a year old. Well, by that point where I'd applied for a partnership, was I'd come from an 8-month sabbatical plus 6 years in-house. So I had no client base. I had an amazing network, which I obviously tapped into, and I had a specialization which I could use to bolster my presence and my appeal. But I taught myself how to do this.
Really?
Yeah.
Even in the firm that you were with, and there was
I built my own client base. You know, I had my business plan, and I just went out and prayed, and literally.
Please make this work.
But it was.
But like most business plans, you write it out, and then day one you just put it to the side. It's like, right, okay.
I was pretty good at following it to start with, but it was about having that confidence and to go out and sell myself.
Yeah.
And this is where it all boils down to, and this is where Braving Boundaries really stepped from, is that whether it's building a client base, whether it's building, your partnership program, whether it is dealing with day-to-day struggles in the office, is what is that self-talk? What is going on that is making you struggle with something? And how do you overcome that to make yourself happier or feel less stressed or stop worrying about it so that you can enjoy doing what you do?
That's really fascinating you say that. Do you think that in law, specifically the legal sector, do you think that there's barriers to individuals sort of admitting that they need help, certainly in areas like that? I mean, it's quite a broad subject, obviously, but do you think that law maybe suffers from I don't even know what the word would be, like
yes, it's
big egos and a lot of pressure and
status
and
it's
which obviously then would stop people from admitting that they might be missing something or that they might be not so good at something
or needing help support. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of stigma around the words mental health, mental illness. There's a lot of association to anyone admitting that they may have stress and not feeling so comfortable in a particular environment to it being a weakness. And that fundamentally is not true, by the way, but it doesn't stop the story that people are telling themselves. So there has been a big movement around mental health awareness, which is fantastic. Particularly since 2016, it was there's various surveys that have been done and reports that have been written, but my personal view is the best one that I've read is the American Bar Association, the task force that they created and pulled together a really interesting report on the well-being of lawyers in the USA. I think it was 13,000 lawyers that they interviewed and pulled together some really interesting statistics, which are on my website, and I won't be able to. I think it's 23% of lawyers were suffering with depression. I think it's about 64%, 65% that have struggled with anxiety or stress-related problems throughout their career. These are huge numbers.
That's huge numbers. Yeah,
and
that's just the ones that admitted it.
Yeah,
as well.
Well, exactly. So then you get these tests that are coming over, and law firms will pass out. How can we help you? What are you struggling with? I mean, are lawyers really going to want to say, I'm really stressed, I'm overworked, I can't cope, which is what that, the image that you think you're portraying. I can't cope with this. I'm not strong enough.
I'm not going to reach partnership if I admit that I need help or I'm having a tough time of it at the moment.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. I've read those pieces by the American Bar Association as well. And then that led me on to a piece in CNN as well, that on the website that was about, it was wonderfully titled, Why Are Lawyers Killing Themselves?
Oh, good,
which
great.
was, obviously jumped out. I was like, oh, well, we must read that. But that was from around the same sort of time. And they then did a separate study, and the numbers again were frightening. I think of all the professions in America, the lawyers were fourth for suicides and things like that. Geez, it's huge numbers, and there's obviously a problem there, but it's certainly something that needs to be addressed and talked about.
Yeah, look, I mean, mental health issues haven't been aren't something that's new to the profession. And we've just talked about why it's still that there has been this resistance to it and that admission around it being stigmatized. But the reality is these issues need to be addressed. There isn't a case of looking at this as, it's probably not an expense that's worth spending any money on. But the reality is your lawyers are your bloodline, your blood force, whatever the correct terminology is, but they are your engine. And if you don't protect your engine, how are you going to continue to build that business? How are you going to become an efficient business when you don't have the driving force that's required underneath?
Yeah, we talked earlier that if lawyers were your car, you'd MOT it, you'd oil it, you'd look after it. You don't just drive it into the ground until you push it off a cliff.
Yeah.
And with law firms specifically and legal departments within in-house, your main asset, certainly for law firms, is the people that you need. And therefore, with all of the stresses and the strains, what I really want to touch on is let's start off with what is mental health. What can you tell me about what is mental health?
So I can give you the WHO definition. I'll tell you what the WHO definition is. So it's a state of well-being in which the individual realises his or... I've written that down wrong. Start again. So the WHO definition is a state of well-being in which the individual realises his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So that's all well and good. Nice definition. But my view of what the Western Cape actually has a beautiful description of what mental health is. And mental health is not the absence of mental illness. It is the presence of mental health and well-being.
That's interesting because actually, as a layman, the term mental health usually produces a stigma that, then there's something wrong, where it's actually the word, where the focus there is on the mental rather than on the word health.
Yeah. So if you have broken your leg, you will go and take some rest and until your leg is fixed again, because it requires rest. It is it's a bone, or if if you haven't broken it, but if you've strained a muscle, you will take the weight off it and you will let it heal. Your brain is a muscle. If that needs to just take some time off so it can fix itself, then where is the stigma in that?
Yeah, I think, and we've probably both seen, and maybe you were one of them as well, lawyers in firms working around the world where they're not protected, they're not looked after. All the pressures we talked about earlier and multiple other pressures. I mean, we haven't even got into like personal life and kids, divorce, all the things that add more stress onto you. But yet they're not, in many cases, not really given the time to then take a break. Like if you were a sportsman and you pulled a calf muscle, you're given time and you're given rehabilitation to get over that. Then they strengthen you so it won't happen again because they've invested so much money into you.
Exactly.
Whereas businesses aren't, the average corporate isn't always like that. They don't. There has been a tendency in the past to sort of churn and burn almost and like burn people out.
Which is costly.
Costly. Honestly, I've seen. I mean, I shouldn't sort of broadly state, but the US law firms, have typically in the past been probably the number one type of firm where you have to give up your life. Yeah, I'm glad we said it at the same time. And I've seen one person jumps out at me. Obviously, I'm not going to mention any names, but I remember him coming to our office to obviously look for a new career path. But he was a dead man walking. And I've never, it haunts me to this day that someone's job can drive someone to that physical and mental unwellness. That's such a word. Exhaustion. Yeah. Okay, so from what you've seen yourself and what you've seen in your profession, how does mental health manifest itself?
Gosh, it can come in a variety of ways. So we've been talking about stress, anxiety, depression, and to that kind of more extreme level of horrendousness of suicide and going down that route. But it also comes in forms of like changes in behaviour, becoming more erratic, being just a bit more angry and temperamental. It also can be seen through sleep problems and insomnia, through substance abuse, through alcohol, through drug taking, in order to try and numb out is usually the reason for that. It also, partly inherent in the legal profession and that marketing side of things. There's a lot of drinking and side, but it's often used to numb out. There is
and to escape.
Escapism, and then there's low self-esteem. So there's a lot of lawyers that are working so hard, not seeing progression or not seeing available opportunities, or in this competitive environment where there's so much competition. How am I seen? And if they're not seen, that, well, I'm not good enough, I'm not worth it, and that negative spiral that comes with that. And then there's quite a lot of impulsive actions. There's the opposite of that as well, which is I gain my value from being seen. So I become more productive. I become overproductive. I have to achieve to be seen. I gain from praise, which creates the workaholic, which I know all too well about. But it's expanding yourself, becoming that superhuman, and being able to be seen in multiple areas. So there's lots of different ways that mental health can be evidenced. Or poor mental health, rather, can be evidenced in the legal world.
And do you think that from past experiences, do you think that it's largely to do with the atmosphere that's created, or do you think it's down to the individuals that are, just you lawyers are a bunch of crazy so-and-sos and you've just all... and that's what attracts the alpha characters to that industry, or do you think it's the environment that's created and not as enough is done about mental health?
Bearing in mind that not all lawyers are alphas, and that I think there is an attraction to law for alphas. It's prestige. There's an identity. There's a status that they can envelope themselves in, which is that's one form. I think the environment exaggerates the poor mental health in many aspects. I think it can create great mental health as well if you've got a really supportive community around you and a really supportive team. But if you don't, and there is that, I hate to say it, but toxic work environment, the mental strain that comes alongside that is pretty exhausting, to be honest.
Yeah, I can be honest with you. I tell you, I myself, as a business owner and a business leader, have suffered greatly in the past in terms of the pressures that have been that have come from all angles. Not least of all as you're building a business, as I have been for a number of years now. But certainly when we were in Asia, the drive to work, all hours was like a badge of honour. If you didn't go to bed till 2:00 in the morning because you're working, we didn't have one holiday where I didn't take my work with me. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was when we were in a place called Langkawi for a wedding, and we were staying in a place, one of those stilted huts, in the sea, and it's magic, and you're looking out over the sea, and I'm busy on the computer like this. And Marie, my wife's going, that's it. The work doesn't come on holiday with us again, because she said, I've given up every holiday so you can work. And there was moments like that where you're thinking, I think I was even at that time just going, well, whatever, just carry on, because
what do you want me to do in this situation?
Yeah, because you go back to saying silly things. Well, the money that I'm making is paying for this holiday, but unless you give, I never gave myself a break. I'm very similar to you, and maybe that's why we're both attracted to Cape Town, which, by the way, seems to have work-life balance sorted.
Well, go speak to some of the lawyers.
Yeah, true. Yeah, largely, what I like about Cape Town is that, and what I really had to learn when I came from Asia was that people do value their life here, and they will. 5 o'clock is done, and whilst that I found that a little bit frustrating at the beginning, because I'd walked out of a country that's probably one of the hardest working countries, and they work every hour. If they could work 24 hours, they would. To somewhere where it was a complete shift. But no, I suffered greatly from erratic behaviour, and I wasn't leading the company the right way. I can look back now and I could hold my hands up and go, the stress levels, the lack of sleep, and then we had kids, and that was just like, oh wow, all bets are off now.
So what was it that made you change? What was it that made you take a step
I
back?
had a fundamental change. My mother died, and a month later we were moving to Cape Town. So in a space of about a month, no, I would say probably a space of about 3 months, first of all, I realised that the business couldn't go on the way it was going. We're it's very similar to a law firm, very highly driven on revenue. Every month you're starting at zero. We had one stage we had 5 offices, 4 in Australasia, if you like, Melbourne, Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Johannesburg. Trying to manage all of that, we had all those offices, but we didn't have a huge number of staff. We had about 40 staff or so. So I still tried to control everything, and manage everybody to my expectations. What do you mean you're not working at 2 a.m.? I do, so you must.
It's your business.
I made so many mistakes on that. And it came to a crescendo with Mum getting sicker as well, and being in the UK and me being away. And I'm an only child as well, so, very close to the parents. And then it all just came to a big explosion almost, where I just said that enough is enough with the business. We cannot go on like this, because you'll know yourself, living in Asia, the salaries are enormous. The overheads are enormous. The rent, if you transfer the office rent into rand terms, I think we were paying.
Cry.
We had a small, it was millions, and you can't, and the pressure on that to make that every month, and then I just said no, we have to change ways, because it's also affecting the service we were providing. So I made a load of changes. Basically, I told everybody we're not going to be paying those salaries anymore. You're going to have to go to commission only, and that obviously caused huge amounts of fights and lots of resignations and lots of people leaving, etc. Not everyone, but whilst I'm going backwards and forwards to see Mum, who was obviously the last days. So it got to that stage, and also then having to say goodbye to my home for 10 years to then move here. That was pretty much what changed. It was like a big explosion, all happened at once, and I was just like, nah, I'm not going through that again.
Yeah.
Because then maybe, I don't know, with your clients at Braving Boundaries or with yourself when you've been through pressure, but you start to immediately look back and go, and one of the hardest things is to admit how many mistakes you made.
One of the questions I ask my clients, which I would have asked you maybe a year before all of that happened, is what direction are you going in? Could you see that this was a direction that you were heading?
I could see it was a direction that it wasn't sustainable, either through my health, my mental health, and my marriage would have probably died at some point. Thankfully it hasn't. It was just not sustainable, and the business wasn't gonna. We were really good, and we still are really good, but now we've got a lot more time for our clients. We've got a lot more. It's much more about service and about utilising my knowledge and our, the staff we have now are all highly experienced. I think a lot of it, if you look back on some of the mistakes that I made with the business as well, which added to the stress and the mental health issues, was just ego as well. Like a lot of it was driven by ego. You see, I also work in a highly competitive industry, and you just want to, you want all the things that other businesses have. You want a grad program, and you want, we won a lot of awards. So we had a lot of people, a lot of eyes on us all the time. And prestige, And then you realise that's total nonsense. And just go, who cares? No one cares. And that allows you to be better, and thankfully in a much better place. But I can see it, and also I think from my own career, with regards to me still helping lawyers, it's another it's another thing that I've been through that I can help the senior lawyer with.
Yes.
I can identify people and go, look, have a look at this. Hopefully, maybe even refer you clients and go, you need to speak to Frieda first. But
the reality is that wouldn't it have been better to have caught that earlier down the line and made changes before it got to a point where you're burnt out and you are really struggling, and not in your case, but your life, your marriage is on the line, your life is on the line, your inability to think straight is there. You see it a lot earlier. You don't admit it, but you do start to see these patterns a lot earlier on.
You those closest to you do as well.
Yeah.
I definitely believe I had some level of anxiety, and that is a horrible thing to have. If anybody listening to this has ever had it, please speak to Frieda, because it's horrid. Because you're not thinking the way that you think, and certainly your wife or your husband or someone around you, those close to you, they're like, what's coming out of your mouth?
Yeah. Well, it might be worth me telling you part of my story, I suppose. But for me, I used to be a really big workaholic. So I was driven to the office. It was my career, was my life, and I'd wanted to be a lawyer for a long time, and that, I suppose, drove that ambition and that need to prove and to reach the newest heights throughout my career.
The power on the tube in London.
It was always a power dress.
Get into London, pound the streets. Yeah,
and I liked it. I'd worked in all the big cities around the world except for New York, and you were talking about those ridiculous work hours in Hong Kong, and I remember getting called by a bloody bank at 2:00 in the morning, and that was acceptable. I said, I was only a junior at that stage, and I said, I will address this in the morning. And I think I might have been sleep deprived, which is why that came out my mouth. But I was very good for setting that boundary.
I've told a client off at midnight for calling my mobile. I've gone, no.
It wasn't even urgent.
I've got a 3-year-old kid. It's
not acceptable.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got to a stage, kind of mid-2000 teens, don't know what you call those, but something around there. And I'd got into another routine of 100-hour weeks. I was leading the biggest project of the company at that stage. I was burning the candle at both ends, in early, out late, and it was. I was exhausted. I was unsupported. We didn't have necessarily the right team members in place at that stage. There was other issues going on in the office at the time. That's probably the nicest way of putting it. So there was a lot of...
Save that for part 2 of the podcast.
But there were issues going on in the office that were certainly having their own ramifications on the work environment. And, it wasn't just the office's fault. I realised that, I didn't realise at the time, but in hindsight, I needed to be in control of everything that was going on. So I certainly wasn't capable of delegating to gain some of the support that I needed. I wasn't able to let go of those reins. I'm still quite a control freak, but it was definitely a lot higher at that stage. And for me, that mental health stress manifested in losing a ton of weight. I was skinny as when I was about 2014, 15.
Unhealthily so?
Unhealthily so. And I lose my appetite when I'm stressed. So it's not a healthy thing. I'm glad I don't put on a ton of weight and struggle that way, but it's equally unhealthy.
Sounds damaging.
Yeah,
either way, yeah,
exactly. So my immune system's down. I ended up getting pneumonia and collapsing on a ski slope in Chamonix, top of Bochart, and I was like, can't really breathe. So I sat down.
Pneumonia is hardcore. I know people who've had it, and it's there's a lot of similarities between the COVID virus and what you go through.
And so there was I remember skiing down. I stopped, I paused, and when I fell over, I was just like, I'm really struggling breathing. And it felt like I was skiing in a bubble. And if you ever ski, skiing in a bubble is not great. You've got no awareness around you. And I was skiing down and I took myself off to hospital and got diagnosed with pneumonia. And still didn't stop. I was forced to stop for 2 weeks then. And it was this, at what point is enough enough? What is it that's going to make me stop? And I wasn't sleeping properly, lists and lists going through my head of things I had to do. Get up, wake up in the morning, slept with my BlackBerry at the time next to my head.
Well, I love the BlackBerry.
Check. First thing
with
I
the
look
little
at.
red light flashing. There's another email.
And, holidays disappeared. I was always sacrificing holidays and claiming them back, or working through them. I remember being in Australia with my family down in Perth one time, and I worked from 8 o'clock at night through to 4 o'clock in the morning, got up, played with the kids at 7 o'clock, worked through the day, same for 3 days because I was doing a deal in Canada. And it became, I was trying to be superwoman. I was trying to do everything. So as much as that stress was taking on my health and my body physically, I was also trying to catch up with all my friends at the weekend because that was the only time that I could see them. I was trying to socialise, I was trying to be fun, but there wasn't enough time that was quality time. I was splitting myself so thinly between everything and taking on more stuff because I was still needing to be praised and still needing to be loved and still needing to be seen. And
trying to get promotions.
Pay rises. And it just became this kind of never-ending ball. And this superwoman, I was head of charity committee, head of the events committee, organising the parties.
You're taking all the pro bono stuff as well.
Because wow. I wanted to be fun, I wanted to be this, I wanted to be that. And I wanted to be a good lawyer. And all of this, there was an identity that suddenly became created around it. And to let go of that, to take a step back, which is what I needed to do, I have to give up some of that identity. And where was my value if I gave up that identity? I wasn't people pleasing anymore. People wouldn't like me anymore. People wouldn't value me anymore. People wouldn't find me as useful. And you kind of tear up when you're talking about it. It's that really difficult position of, I can't sustain this, but I don't know how to stop.
Wow.
And that was my story. And the thing that I went through counselling for my daddy issues, which was before all of that, actually. So I'd got that kind of view of my self-worth back in play. But it didn't help me move forward. And that's where the coaching side came in, which was, I had a coach who helped me go from present. I'd sorted out my past issues and my dad's stuff. There's my northern twang coming in.
Oh yeah, and love it.
and then stepping forward, because you get to that position where you're like, okay, I like me. I know where my value is. I know I'm good, but now what? And I was single. For me, it was things like being single, and then what do I want from my life? Well, actually, I want to be in a relationship that's healthy and happy, and that I want a career as well, and I want to be out running and be able to do yoga and to do all these other things, to travel without being interrupted for the entire time. And I had to really, really question was I living by my core values, and what was a priority now?
That's amazing. Did you have to actually did you have to sit down and remind yourself what your core values were at the time, and who am I, and what parts of myself do I like? And, because I think many people who get to those crossroads, of which there's millions out there, thousands, tens of thousands in the law, that are going through a similar thing at the moment, there'll be parts of themselves that they like, and they don't want to reinvent themselves. But then I suppose they don't have to. They just have to
shine.
Bring out to somebody about, and help. It's interesting you say that sort of, you can have counselling to sort out past issues, and then you get to the here and now, but what's next?
Yeah.
How do I get to that? And what do I need? And was that around the same sort of time you then decided, okay, I'm going to take some time out for me?
Yeah, it was about a year before I decided to leave. I really sorted out my priorities. I started by whittling down, being a people pleaser. Everybody's in your life. You've got to do something for everyone. But I started to whittle down friendships that weren't serving me and weren't beneficial to me. That was kind of the first starting point. And
declutter your life.
Yeah, and make a priority to go climbing. I took up mountain climbing, and I used to go alpine climbing at the weekends.
Nice.
A very hot instructor. I was single at the time.
That
helped. But he, like, being out in the fresh air, building up my immune system again. And the one thing about mountain climbing is that you cannot think about anything else.
Yes.
So you switch off. Your life is literally in your hands at that point. And I was climbing some crazy stuff. And, oh God, it was amazing. I climbed the Matterhorn.
Did you really?
Yeah. I did get hauled up at one point. I would never have climbed without a guide. But these are things that I started to really invest in, that me time, that I found things that gave me joy again and happiness. And then once you build that up, I found that finding that I really liked myself allowed me to be in a position to meet somebody who was then worthy of me as much as I was of them, which was really important.
Absolutely. No, that's so fascinating. It's really... the one thing you touched on there, where the ability to sort of de-stress when you're mountain climbing, because you've got to just think about what you're doing, otherwise you may die. It's a very similar with other hobbies where you can really... I'm trying to think of a couple. I mean, I box, so when you're in the ring, you can only think about the person in front of you and what you're doing, because otherwise you're going to get hurt. And so you completely separate yourself from... You're not thinking about work at all, and that's really important. Back in a previous life, I started to learn to play the guitar, and whilst I never kept it up, I can see a few guitars in my... While I never kept it up, I remember from the lessons, when you start and it's you and the guitar, and it was so good for stress. Okay, so pre-COVID, obviously we're living in that world now, which is pre-COVID and post-COVID. What were the health issues you saw in the lawyers that you were working with?
Well, I think the issues that I saw most lawyers struggling with were, we've touched on a couple of those. So that competitive work environment, the stress that brings for people that aren't competitive by nature, but still need and want to keep their jobs. And then those that are overly competitive, pushing to hit those higher positions and increase their salaries and jump up the corporate ladder. There is that too much work. I've got too much work. And that's always going to be a case. But pre-COVID, it was there's too much work, spending so much time in the office. And the ramifications of that are strained relationships, not spending enough time with your kids, not getting to school concerts, not having time for yourself, no me time. I'm pretty sure with most families and lawyers, if you've got any time, it goes to your family. So there's no time for you. Not having the ability to go out and do sports and socialise and take your foot off the pedal. Also, we've talked about this previously, but this overweight, putting on weight, reducing weight, and those ramifications of what happens. Single lawyers not being able to get out and go dating because they've got too much work to do, don't feel that they can leave their desk because they need to be seen, to be at work, to be busy. It drives me nuts.
Hopefully we're moving away from that at some point.
We'll talk about that post-COVID, but this general overwork and identity being related to how busy you are, that's quite a big one really with lawyers. You've got a lot of time being spent in the offices and the impact that has on personal relationships, but it also leads to, unfortunately, relationships within the office, because you end up spending more time with your partners and your staff and colleagues than you do with your family. And unfortunately, it is not news that, the law firms particularly, and corporates, there's a lot of office and inter-office affairs.
There's a high level of divorce rates in the law.
Yeah,
sadly.
And then the toxic work environments, and that is around different personalities being in small teams and being surrounded by each other, the competitiveness that comes with that, and how insecurities are displayed. So as confident as lawyers are intended to be and expected to be, lots of lawyers are super insecure. Nothing to do with the law. There are, these are inherent issues.
Human beings.
Yeah. And the legal environment, and particularly a toxic work environment, not all legal environments are toxic, but the toxic ones exacerbate those feelings of insecurity, and they can be exposed through bullying, through ostracism, through passive aggressiveness, one of my favourites, and isolation, and just creating really tricky work situations, and people don't want to actually be in those work situations.
I wanted to touch on that bullying aspect because you wrote a nice blog on your website about touching on that ostracism. And that, I read the blog last night. It's sort of silent office bullying that you sort of touched on, yeah. and it's something that I'm sure a lot of your clients with Braving Boundaries have first-hand experience of. You may have had it yourself. I know, it's not just law, but I remember my dear late mother had it in her workplace as well. Yeah, and that affected her for a long time, even into her retirement.
Oh gosh.
And you just don't expect that, right? But it obviously happens. And I'm sure it happens in a lot of corporates as well. People are just trying to climb above each other. And it's one of the reasons why I never got on particularly well in corporates, because I was just like, that's nonsense.
Look, it's funny, we use the word ostracism. I know what it means, but it actually means exclusion. So it's the complete contrary to bullying, which is this attack. There's a not necessarily a physical attack, but there is an interaction that creates that hostility towards somebody, whereas ostracism is quite the opposite. It's I will cut you out. So it's isolation, it's shunning, it's cold shouldering, and closing someone out. And the funny thing is, it is in a lot of law firm policies and corporate policies, it's recognised as a type of bullying. It's covered by that. It is so difficult to prove because nothing happens. You can't prove that someone's blocked you off email groups or just thrown something at you without, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to not invite you to dinner with the rest of the team last night. And you're like, and it sounds so pathetic when you're going through it as well. And you're like, I know what's going on. It is making me feel shit. And there's nothing I can do about it, because if I go to HR and I complain, they don't include me and they don't like me, it's playground behaviour. We've learnt it. We learn it very, very early age, and it's this. Take me off the WhatsApp group. Thanks for that. But it's a really powerful way, because what it does is it disconnects you. Human beings need connection. They need to be part of a team. This is why COVID's been so difficult for lots of people. We've lost that connection. And by chopping someone out of a team or a group of friends or whatever group you're in, it's incredibly damaging, and it makes it spiral. You spiral into all sorts of negative self-talk when you're in that situation. I see it with a lot of clients, and I went through it myself twice. So
you've had first-hand experience.
First-hand experience. One as an associate and one much higher up the chain. So
unbelievable. It still goes on.
It still goes on.
Now, the post-COVID world that we're finding ourselves in, certainly within the law and within the businesses themselves, are we seeing many changes at the moment happening, and what effect will that have, do you think, on lawyers having different health issues, or
I think
things disappearing?
I think the health issues, so the mental health issues, are the same. The mental health issues are going to be no different. They are the issues. The causes of them, I think, are going to be different. So what we're seeing quite a lot of at the moment is around worries about job security, worries about, people have been made redundant. It can often trigger a lot of negative self-talk and low self-esteem, why me? And that has a knock-on effect to your confidence. So when you're going out to get a job and you're going, oh God, I was made redundant, everyone's going to think I wasn't a very good lawyer. That's where I think that negative self-talk is going to come out a bit more. Job security, you've still got a job, but you don't know what's coming. All the unknowns at the moment are causing lots of strain. I think the pressure of going back to work and not necessarily wanting to go back because COVID has scared you. You are aware that you've got elderly relatives at home with you and you don't want to expose them to it. In my view, there are some legal groups that need to be back. I mean, people that have to go to court, to the extent that there aren't any virtual courts, they obviously need to appear in court. But my view, I don't think lawyers really need to be back in the offices full time at the moment. I'm quite happy to be contradicted there, but I don't think it's a necessity. I think there's two polar opposites on anxiety from working from home, feeling separated from everybody, feeling like you've not got that day-to-day connection, particularly the younger lawyers, because they're used to having that community, that learning environment where they're tossing ideas around and easily getting information and education. And that feeling of, if you are someone who needs to be seen, then you're not necessarily being seen when you're sitting at home working from your computer. There's that kind of, will they know that I'm doing my job? So you can link into that overproductivity from being at home because you need to be seen to be doing something somehow. So it's quite a spiral. And then the other one is some people are really enjoying working at home. It allows flexibility. You don't waste time in a car going to the office. You don't you don't have to start
especially
it.
In Cape Town.
Yeah.
I'd be like to sit
2 hours.
2 or 3 hours worth of traffic, every day.
But you don't have to start at 9. You can. I start. I mean, I work at home anyway, so that's different. But I start at 6 sometimes. I start at 8 sometimes. But the point is, I get my job done, and that knowing that I've done my job, knowing that I've done my work, I've brought in money. I've supported it. It's different being a specialist consultant partner, whatever you want to call me. But it's that I am supporting myself to many extent. I don't have to justify my hours as long as I justify the hours being billed. And I think that there is that flexibility, that ability to do other things around the house, see my other half, take the dogs for a walk, have that work-life balance. People are starting to see that that's plausible. And, maybe this is a nicer environment to be in. It gives you a chance to reflect, to pause, to stop for a little bit and see what you want from your life. And then I suppose the other aspect is that people are really struggling working from home because their kids are home all day. Yes. and there is the guilt that goes with that of I should be spending time with my children versus I should be working. I mean, I've got stuff that needs doing and I can't commit to anything because I feel completely torn.
What I've seen with lawyers and also with my own staff and myself, people are falling into almost two distinct camps. They're either becoming overwhelmed with what's going on at home, with the fact that their kids are there and now they're having to become a half teacher as well as keep the revenue coming in, and they may be in a practice area that's effectively died, so there's all those pressures, or you fall into another camp where you're actually quite enjoying it and I don't want to go back to the office and go back to that what could be sorry to use the term, but it could be a toxic environment, and suddenly you're actually liking your job again, and you're liking. And I think you touched on it as well. I think it was one of your blogs, or it might have been one of your posts that you put on social media, where it touched on working from home and finding your core hours effectively, when you work the best. I think you touched on it, and that got me thinking. And then I spoke to my staff on our weekly Zoom call, as is that we are now meeting on a Monday. And I said, whilst you're working from home, first of all, I'll give it to my staff, GRM, they've been brilliant, every single one of them. productivity has gone through the roof, and I haven't even had to ask. Because everyone's enjoying themselves, rather than having to traipse into the office and 2 hours on the bus or in the car and stuck in traffic and what have you. And I just said to them, and I think I mentioned this to you the other day, but I said to them, okay, just take a step back for a second and think about when you work best during the day, and also the things that you've actually managed to include.
Very good.
That you want to keep, because I want you to stay as productive and as happy as you seem to be at the moment. And I think you touched on it when maybe again in your blog, where you said you do your best
6 to 9.
6 to 9, that was it. And that's for me as well, because my son and my daughter get me up, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning or something, very early. And then I start doing my work, because I have Asian clients based in Asia, and then I'm straight through it. And, not having to rush out the door to get them to school on time, and not having to, and then squeeze in the gym if I could do it once a week, just because, and even then when you're at the gym, you're lifting weights, but all you're thinking about is how many emails I've got to go and answer, and everything, suddenly the time became my own. And I was like, I do my best work in the morning, and then have a break, go have a workout, box, or go to the gym, or not to the gym, obviously, or go for a run, take the dog for a walk, or, whatever it might be. Have a bit of me time, and then go back to it in the afternoon. And
you're much more focused and
productive.
Yeah.
And doing, and not being overly stretched, and your time's your own. And it's another conversation that I've had with my wife a lot, actually. And even last night we talked about it again. It's like, just think about the things that we really like at the moment, and let's just make sure we keep them. Mm-hmm. So
we've had the same conversation.
You have as well, yeah. And what we pinned it down to is that the schools run our lives. so no more. No more St Cyprian's. No more. I'm not having that anymore. No, we're in charge. But I do think. Yeah, but I have, obviously we are continuing to register lawyers onto our books, because we're still trying to help them find jobs, and people who are looking for a career move, or they may have been made redundant in the recent months. And you see a completely different side of it. And I think that's where you touched on with sort of almost new health issues. Right?
Yeah, is there a lot of stress that you're feeling with these clients, or is it just kind of, this is just what it is kind of attitude? No,
I think some of the people, I think a lot of people, certainly those that have come to us at a senior level, because obviously we really only deal with senior lawyers. Yeah. Those that have been made redundant or have left, or their revenues aren't up, or unbelievable amount of stress, because I think a lot of them don't know where they're going to get their next job from.
Yeah, and often there's quite a lot that are probably primary breadwinners in the family as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's opening a whole new can of worms, because this came out of the blue, right? Yeah. I mean, I was in Hong Kong in January and February and they were going through their peak, and I didn't even know anything about it. And I saw some friends, and they were like, "Oh, you heard about the virus? Here? Why are you here?" I was like, "What virus?" And then before you know it, our lives were turned upside down. By the way, I'm not patient zero. I didn't bring it into the country with me. I haven't got it. I haven't had it.
Got tested for it. Yeah,
got tested. But it's interesting how and I think a lot of what you'll probably see with your clients with Braving Boundaries is, I assume, is a lot of people with they don't know what to do next. They don't know. You're going to have some work on your hands, I think. And how do you think, specifically to talk about big law, because the big law firms, obviously they employ the most amount of people, and they're probably having to really shift a lot of focus. There'll be some very interesting board meetings. I imagine that some of the big five here in South Africa. But what do you think the changes that they are making, or they will make, to maybe, from a mental health perspective, but also from the wider business perspective, that might help the individual?
I think there is going to be... Firstly, I think that whole bananas thought around she's working from home, he's working from home, is going to be completely nullified. It isn't she's doing nothing. She is sitting around and watching TV, or he's going and playing volleyball and having a day off. It's not code for having a day off. It is, I am working from home. That, I think, that whole stigma around that, I think, will disappear. And I mean, I remember just a little story. I went to a meeting in Cape Town a few weeks before COVID, and I was saying, I work. Where do you work? Oh, I work here. And what do you do? Oh, I do this, that, and the other. And I didn't realise that they had an office in Cape Town. I said, oh, they don't. I work from home. Oh, do you spend all day in your pyjamas? I thought,
well, yeah,
even if I do, which I don't, I do sometimes, but not always. My brain didn't die, didn't stay in bed because I was wearing casual clothing.
That's amazing, because that's like literally that's now changed, because everybody had to work from home.
Yeah.
And
In all sorts of attire.
yeah. Whatever's
or
clean.
not in some of the videos. But so that's one thing that I think will go. I think flexible working will become more acceptable and built in more, because people will see the productivity and the value in doing that. I think that people will want to spend some time at home as well. So, and I think law firms will be more open to that. I don't think people need to be in the office to do work. Years ago, I mean, I often drafted a joint venture agreement at home because it was quiet, or I locked myself in a room in the office because I needed that concentration. So I think there's going to be that will be, people be more open to that. Virtual systems are already in place. They were in place a long time ago. We are 24/7 connected anyway, which is an issue in itself, but there is no reason to be in the office 24/7 either. I think there will be, and big law firms are going to hate me for saying this, but I do think that there's going to be a reduction in law firm sizes. I don't think these big offices of 20 floors of office space, sprawling boardrooms are going to be the way forward. They're incredibly costly. The overheads are huge. I mean, you're very fortunate if you paid off your mortgage for a law firm, but I mean, maybe some have, but I just don't think that, particularly we were talking about it earlier, is with rates having an issue and charge out rates becoming what clients asking for lower rates, because there are people that have broken away from big law to go and set up their own and charging less money. And that competitive nature has been there pre-COVID a long time. But I think this is going to be something that is really looked at now on how to reduce those overheads.
Yeah.
And become more, what's that word they use? Streamline, more. It's not pivot. There's another word that means the same thing. And what else? I think, and I suppose with a knock on to that kind of reduction in office size, I am really hoping at some stage someone starts to address this billable hour and looking at whether that is the right standard to be determining productivity of lawyers. It is the bane of mental health issues. You have to have hit 1,500 hours, 1,200 hours a year of chargeable XYZ. Even
more so at the US law firms, I know.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember when I started was I was the third highest billing associate. I was proud of it.
Yeah, it's a badge of honour.
Yeah. And that then stemmed for the rest of my career. And it doesn't, your value shouldn't be attributed to how long you're sitting at the office. I think there are other ways. And granted, I'm not saying, I'm sure somebody's listening going, well, go on then, tell us what the perfect model is. And, well, my view is that partners should be judged on work that they bring in and costs, if there is a monetary value that is going to dictate that. If you've got overheads to cover, if you cover your budget, anything else is the profit. So there is a monetary way of looking at it, and maybe commission, and that option is a different way of looking at payment.
I giggle or laugh there because I wrote I wrote an article for the Asia Law Portal on this very subject.
Oh, good.
And
I should go read that.
I was the same. Well, everything you've just said is pretty much what I covered. And I said, while I was writing it and before I sent it to the editor, I was thinking along the lines that you just said there. Oh, some lawyers are going to hate me for saying this, but it needs to be addressed. I mean, I work in the legal recruitment industry, so I'm very familiar with what people get paid and how they earn their money and the stress they have to get to hit their targets and everything like that. And my article was, I wrote it from the heart, and I just said, look, I think this is we are at a crossroads for the entire industry. I'm very in tune with the industry, and I'm pretty sure that I know where it's going. And I think, but it goes a bit further than just the way that they charge clients. You've got to look at the whole way that lawyers are remunerated. You may not agree with this, although you have just touched on some of my points, which is firms who've still got a lockstep model in place for their partners, so that the partner doesn't even have to work very hard, and he or she will know what they're going to get next year, effectively. I've been here 15 years now, so I immediately move up to that level, even though they may not be creating the revenue that justifies that. I think that's going to change, and we are seeing quite a lot of law firms actually move away from that gradually. I think there's going to be a lot more. I think the fees that people are prepared to pay, or companies are prepared to pay, will be reduced. It's already hugely competitive, and therefore the lawyers will move to a much more profit-sharing, commission-based model, whereby, and they should. And I touched on an article I wrote in the Asia Law Portal where I wrote, I've got it in front of me, but I basically said that going forward, there's going to be a lot more scrutiny when hiring a partner for what they can bring in, and what they're actually bringing in, and what the clients they can bring with them, and what they were spending during COVID, and what they're planning to spend on legal services going forward. And then if included into that, you've got this whole world of legal tech that is starting to become really brilliant. Some of it. I mean, we had a trial of a thing called Luminance the other day. I think it's called Luminance, which I think one or two of the firms here use.
Okay.
Amazing. It can pick up in various different languages. It can pick up mistakes in contracts in a matter of seconds, and it's an AI machine learning tool. There was a story that a chairman of a law firm in Hong Kong, when I visited last year, said to me he was just blown away. The Hong Kong Law Society had just done a sort of a show of a machine learning tool that could put together a document, it was reviewing a document rather than it could review a document that would have taken this associate who was also on stage. He said it would have probably taken me a couple of days to do a really good job on that. The computer did it in 0.09 of a second. Oh, God. And it was 100% accuracy. So you have all of that coming in. And also I said, I can't remember the numbers, but someone said to me the other day that of all the industries, there is more intellectual property registration and trademarks going on in law than any other industry in terms of new tech.
Okay.
So then you take on that on board, and that's going to have a pressure on the way that lawyers are remunerated. And again, the clever lawyer, of which many of you are obviously, and the savvy lawyer, they know this is coming. And then, so what I was just going to say just escapes me there. But also then you have the knock-on effect of the stress levels that's going to produce on the juniors, right? The students.
Where's my job?
Where's my job? I'm going to get replaced by.
But the reality is, as much as AI can help at the lower end, at the document creation level, you've still got to train those juniors to be seniors, to be good lawyers at the top end. So it might speed up that base learning, but those junior lawyers are still going to need to understand how those documents work, and that's where I think there is going to have to be value attributed to that. So we were talking about how to change that billable model. For senior associates, I think it's going to be more about, that commission base would work at a senior level. They've got to if they want to be partners, they've got to start creating that business plan and that partnership plan. and bring in work. By senior level, that's something that they are expected to do. Yeah. So maybe the commission model does work there, and they're rewarded as a result of who they bring through those doors. But that requires training and business development at the lower end. So maybe it's, rather than judging on how many hours the juniors have billed, which I find bizarre anyway, because it depends on what work is coming down the chain. but it's, instead of having levels like that, maybe it's a case of, well, what skills are we teaching them? How can we see what capability as a lawyer and sales lawyer they are creating? You know, how are we introducing them into the client world? How are we putting them in front of clients? Are they asking to be involved in document drafting? How are they doing on document drafting? Not throwing them in to go and bring in a client at a junior level, but how are we developing them as lawyers?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for a junior lawyer who's only just learning the law to actually then turn around and start bringing in the big fish, as it were. Yeah. But I do think we're, like, going back a couple of steps, I do think we're a bit of a crossroads with for the whole industry, and I think that's probably going to then add more stress into your client base at Braving Boundaries in terms of the other things that they have to consider now. And like you say, in many cases they might be the main breadwinner, and there's very expensive schools to pay for, and you know, and a certain lifestyle that the
adapted
particular
to and adopted,
the family expects to live, and then the whole world has been turned upside down by COVID, and it's only going to get like to the point of law, and I can only see it becoming much more competitive from a legal fee perspective. You know, that even a few years ago, if someone branched out on their own and set up their own small shop, and you know, the firm that would leave would typically, they'll last a few months, you know. But no, that's not true, you know, because lawyers, clients are looking for value more and more and more now, and there's actually, again, you know, apologies to our big law clientele across the world, but there is much more scrutiny from clients now.
Oh, of course there is.
In terms of, what am I paying for here? You know, okay, you've got a massive building with your name across the top of it. Is this what I'm paying for? Is this why your fees are?
Well, we get that a lot. We
double
get that
the
question,
amount. Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah, and it's only going to get more and more. You know, that's going to.
Mentality's changing. Yeah,
it is, and that's going to have an effect on the professional, and then and therefore you're going to see a lot more pressurised. It'd be interesting to see, and I understand as well, I'm not going to say the stats because I don't know them off the top of my head, but I think what I read the other day as well is that there's more and more people studying law at university.
Oh, really?
And it's kind of like, stop. We periodically, each year, we've done we go to the universities and talk to the law grads about what it's like to get a job in law. I've done it in Melbourne, I've done it in Hong Kong, Singapore, and we've done it here as well, the University of Western Cape and Stellenbosch University, the law schools. And, you know, it's very interesting seeing their young, wonderful faces, and you go, nah, you're not going to earn that.
The activists are going to become a human rights lawyer, and I'm going to change the world for the better. I was that.
quite often, but also, you know, just you know, it's always a good opportunity for us. Firstly, because they get a lot of visits from a lot of law firms, obviously, saying, come work for us, which isn't always like a balanced view, because obviously everybody's law firm is the best, and that kind of thing. Whereas we go in and go, well, we'll tell you about everybody, you know, and we'll tell you what the job market is really like. Not only just to get articles, but then post articles for a newly qualified lawyer. You know, what is it really like? What can you expect to get paid? And those sessions are usually very well received. And
do you give them tips on things that they can do and
how everything from how to write a letter to how to stand out, social media presence, you know. We talk about a lot about that, you know, especially if certainly when we were in Hong Kong and there was all that Occupy Central movement, and it's like, you know, it's great, but you know, your future employer might not really.
This is really appreciated.
You know, so, you know, just bear that in mind. So yeah, they're always really useful. But where I'm getting to is really, you know, there's more and more additional pressure on even the younger lawyer and the more senior lawyer, which will, you know, in a way, hopefully lead to more clients for you, really.
Well, look, I mean, this isn't a sales pitch at all, but the reality is that I hope that law firms are starting to take on board the reality that mental health matters. I mean, we say it. There are programs in every big law firm that we support mental health. We do this, but it's breaking down the fact that this is not a weakness. And anybody that thinks it's a weakness, really, really targeting it and going, tell me why you think it's a weakness.
It's not, and I'm glad you made that point. And I think that, obviously today you and I have shared our own personal stories, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about what I've been through, because it's all part of my journey that I think has made me a really good professional and a good business owner, and actually sympathetic to people who work for me that may be going through their own personal issues as well. But I think it isn't a weakness. It adds strength to your character. And if you're in an environment where you don't feel that you can admit it, then they need to talk to you, or you need to get out of that environment. Come talk to us, and we'll help you get out of that environment, because that environment, in my mind, shouldn't exist anymore.
Well, it's not supporting you.
And we go back to that analogy we were both making earlier about the motor car. Your biggest asset is your people. You've got to MOT them. You've got to oil them. You've got to make some
care of them.
Take care of them, and give them the platform without the bullying and without the ostracizing and without the threat of I haven't done enough hours and whatever. Just to deliver a really good service. And I think, and hopefully this COVID outbreak will actually shift some of that as well.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of topics today, and I do feel like there's so much more we could talk about, specifically about the mental health issues that some lawyers face. But if we could end on, what do you think the individual lawyer can do to protect their mental health or look after themselves? Is there something you can share?
I think one of the biggest things I think that is really useful is to really clock back into what your values are, and have a think about what is important to you and what you want your life to be guided by. And that's not wishy-washy. That's not, all voodoo. The reality is that we work at our best when we follow our core values. So for me, intuition, family, hard work. I'm always going to have hard work in there. But those are core values to me, and that I now apply those in all aspects of my life. So I make sure that, my family time is equally important as my work time. And it's starting to rejig what you want your life to look like and how you're going to get there. And it starts with your values. So that's one thing. Second thing is, we all have the same amount of time in the day. And you do know successful people who have managed to, have a holiday, go and surf in the morning, go and have a life. They do leave the office at 5 o'clock in the evening sometimes. They also leave at 9 o'clock in the evening when they need to. And the way that they are capable of doing that is that they prioritize different things. So work does not become the priority all the time. And to gain work-life balance, we have to reprioritize. We have to carve out time for ourselves and for our other passions. And that is not feeling guilty about it. You are allowed to have a life.
That's a very powerful statement. You reminding yourself that you are allowed to have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hugely powerful.
Well, it's important. Yeah. It's important to have a life. And we ourselves have talked about the other area, what happens when you don't support the other areas of your life. And that leads on to the third point, which is keep your personal relationships close. Create them, nurture them, look after them, because that's your support network. They're your cheerleaders. They are your people that you turn to when times get tough. Life is never always perfect. It's good going when it is going well, but there are going to be down times. You can't have happy times without the bad times. Yes. So in those bad times, you need that support network there, just like they need you. So nurture those relationships. Understand, my fourth point is understand that there is a value of stopping and switching off. If you switch off your brain and give it time to recover, which you need to, your brain is a muscle, it needs time to rejig and reboot, and we talked about that earlier. There is a power of switching off. It's your brain starts being more creative. It starts fusing together all those bits of information that you've taken in and starts creating pathways, starts connecting the dots, starts seeing the way forward and coming up with new ideas that you don't get if you don't stop.
Yeah, some of the best ideas I've ever come up with have been on a run when I've not been in front of the computer. Yeah.
And that is, your brain literally needs that break. If you were, again, we talked about various sports, that if you have hurt your leg running and you've sprained your ankle, you give it time to recover. There's no weakness in that. You let it recover so you can go and do it again. You strengthen it and you can get running and go better and faster later down the line. And then the only other thing I would say is that lawyers do get paid a lot. Some people won't think that they get paid a lot, but we do in comparison to many occupations. Live within your means. The minute you get in your golden handcuff scenario of earning lots and keeping up with the Joneses, I don't drive a very fancy car anymore, but I did. I used to drive an Evoque and I loved my Evoque, but I definitely got into that material world, and it's hard to get out of it. I was single, I only had to think of me. Nobody else was going, oh, I've got this lifestyle as well. But once you start down that path, it can be very difficult to get out of it. So that would be my live within your means. That's
an excellent lesson. And okay, so for anyone listening, how can they get in touch with you at Braving Boundaries?
My email, which is Frieda, Frieda, at bravingboundaries.com. The website, which is www.bravingboundaries.com, is probably the best way to start. You can have a read about what coaching's all about. There's a really good page on which breaks down the benefits of coaching, what we do, how it works. Website, oh, thank you. There's some blog posts. I wrote an article on imposter syndrome, on ostracism, as we were talking about. There's all sorts of...
And just taking a pause as well.
Taking a pause.
Which is great. Yeah. Take a moment.
Work-life balance, working from home. There's all sorts of stuff. And I've got so many ideas of things that I'm writing articles about. Narcissistic bosses being one of them, which will be quite interesting. Narcissism in the office generally. But all the topics that we are not really supposed to talk about as lawyers. All the softer issues, which is quite refreshing and quite nice.
Although we don't like the term softer.
No, but what we call softer issues. But the stuff that we don't talk about and people need to talk about. So that's the website. And social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. You just look Braving Boundaries up. It's pretty simple to find. And LinkedIn. And I'm very happy for you to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today, Frieda. Thank you for your time and your insights. It is an incredible topic that I have seen firsthand, and that needs to be addressed. And with your help, for the lawyers out there in South Africa, and I'm assuming globally as well, if they want to get in touch with you via Zoom calls, etc., then I do a lot of work online. So the majority of my coaching practice is done online because, again, it takes out that driving distance and your hour is your hour. Excellent.
Which is, and it's nice because you can shut yourself away in a room and really, really focus on you for that period. It's good to start self-care. It's self-care. There you go. It's an hour of self-care.
Brilliant. Excellent. We'll get in touch with you, and thank you very much again.
Absolute pleasure.